welcome to this little seminar. Hope everybody enjoyed the concert last night. How many were not at the concert last night? Okay. Well, you get a little bit of a sample of what I played last night. I'll just kind of do a little recap of some of the music I played. But basically, this is a little workshop, a little theremin seminar to show you what the instrument is and how it works, basically how to play it. I'll tell you a little bit about myself right now. I'm Thomas Grillo. I play the theremin professionally. I'm classically trained on violin and flute, and for about the past almost 30 years I've been singing in opera choruses and barbershop choruses. So I kind of have a long history of music, but I've only been playing the theremin since about 2006, and had a lot of fun doing it, just learning how to play it. But kind of found the instrument online accidentally, and bought one as an impulse buy and just been at it ever since. But anyway, the theremin was originally invented in 1919 by Russian radio physicist Leon Theremin. And he basically was trying to solve a problem with a radio that was not working correctly. And this is back when they used radio tubes inside the radios, the little vacuum tubes. And he noticed when he moved his hand to and from one of the tubes that he got a kind of a shrill sound. And he found a way to amplify that and turn it into a musical instrument. Turns out he used to play the cello. And so he took what would have been just noise that we would have discarded ourselves and turned it into a beautiful instrument that you can play without touching. He created an amplifier for the circuit and a way to expand a field of energy around these antennas so that you could actually play the instrument. And so we have a theremin today. And this theremin is what we call a transistor theremin. There's just a little circuit board inside, and it has little transistors on it, resistors and so forth. But it creates an electromagnetic field around each of these antennas. And we interact with the field, and that changes the electronic values of the circuit, what we call a capacitance circuit. And basically, the theremin works on our capacitance. As we move our hand to and from the antenna, the notes go up when we get close to it, and then come down when we pull away from the antenna. And there's a volume antenna right here that allows us to control how soft or loud the instrument is. The closer my hand is to this antenna, the quieter it plays. When I pull my hand away, it gets louder. And so you now have access to dynamics, so you can expand on your expression with music. And of course, as you move your hands, you can play arpeggios, or you can play a scale. And just with a wiggling of the hand, you get a little vibrato. And you've heard that in sci-fi movies. And of course, thanks to the volume antenna, you can do staccatos. Just like that. And so really the instrument becomes a versatile instrument. It's actually considered a synthesizer because of the way it's built. Inside the instrument, in addition to the circuit board, there's what we call oscillators, beat frequency oscillators, which are just tone-generating circuits that produce sound electronically, just like on a keyboard. And each oscillator beats at a frequency of 200,000 times per second, or 200 kilohertz. You can't hear that, it's inaudible. But if you combine two of those beat frequency oscillators together and have one slightly detuned, just a few beats off, then you get an audible tone that you can hear. And then you take that one oscillator that's slightly off and allow it to be controlled by our interactions with the pitch field, with the magnetic field that's around the antennas. And it's just like turning a knob, only you're doing it with the electromagnetic field. And so you can control the theremin without even having to touch it. But that's basically how the theremin works internally. It's all electronic. And you just route the sound out via cable out to an amplifier and speaker, and maybe even add a little bit of effects and a little bit of reverb, and you get a nice tone. What my fingers are doing is I'm changing notes quickly by moving my fingers in and out of the field quickly. It doesn't really matter which ones I move. It's mostly the objective is to change the notes quickly enough to where you don't hear that. You don't want to hear a glissando. And so what we do is we can either move several fingers at the same time, or we can do a knuckle extension. And so it makes it to where you have a more crisp change of notes.
And you wouldn't just poke at it.
Right, and you can. In fact, in the old days, some of the early thereminists did this kind of, they didn't know about the aerial fingering. And so they would just move their whole arm, and you just heard this little glissando going throughout the note change. And then Clara Rockmore, one of the first female thereminists, back in the 20s and 30s, she taught herself a neat technique, the knuckle extension method. And so you got this nice crisp change of notes. And she also figured out that you can let your fingertips touch your thumb, your hand. And so it creates the effect of like you're playing a violin and your fingers are touching the fingerboard. It's really, really quite cool. And so it really adds to the ambiance of the music, and a little more dimension in the way of expression. Pretty cool. And any other questions?
Is there like, I don't know how to phrase it, like people read music?
Right.
Is there music for?
Well, music is just
experimental.
Well, music is just now being written for theremin. There has been other compositions written by, Lydia Kavanaugh wrote some compositions for the theremin. But as far as using the theremin in like orchestra, we usually use the theremin in the role of a cello or a violin. We usually assign it to that, and or a vocal part, because the instrument has a nice wide range. This particular model is the B3 Pro from Danielle Burns, soundslikeburns.com. This instrument has about close to a 7-octave range, and I'll just demonstrate that. Pretty close. And so you get a nice wide range. You almost have the whole range of a piano keyboard on this instrument. And so you could actually play it in either the upright bass or the cello range, or a flute or a violin or a soprano range. So it's pretty versatile in that respect as well. I think you had a question.
Well, now I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
You mentioned, like in orchestra, you use a cello or violin, and are some composers writing music for orchestras where the theremin is orchestra?
Yeah, there are people who are now composing for theremin, just specifically for the theremin. But as I mentioned, all the old classical works, you just find a piece that you want to play the theremin with, and just whichever range you like. If you like the violin parts, go ahead and grab that and practice that.
But is it like part of a big orchestra that does have strings in it, and wind and brass? And
Yeah, there's orchestra. There's several thereminists who have been playing with orchestras. And Clara Rockmore played with an orchestra back in the 30s and 40s. Carolina Ike is one of the world's leading thereminists today. She's been known to play with several orchestras, and same for Lydia Kavanaugh and several other thereminists. And it's really got a nice sound when you combine it with an orchestra, or even just a chamber group, or just a piano. I've got some piano accompaniment here, and in a little bit I'll play a few of those as well.
The first question that I was going to ask was, can you add harmony to it, or do you have to have two theremins?
Ideally, if you have multiple theremins, like we have 3 theremins set up in the room now, if we had 3 fully trained thereminists, we could do a little theremin group or a trio. But if you don't have that, you can run the theremin through an effects device and get a little harmony that way, but it's not as good as a real live trio or a quartet. But it's very hard to do live because you have a technical challenge regarding like theremins. Like this theremin has almost the same circuit as that one. If you were to bring that one too close to this one, or vice versa, you'd get some interference. You'd get a really kind of a harsh, garbled tone. It's like a radio interference almost, because they do create a radio magnetic field around the antennas, all the way around the antennas, and it goes out several feet, almost 6 feet wide. In some cases, you can fill the whole room with the field of a theremin. And so that becomes a bit of a challenge when you want to have a theremin group performing. And I performed with one in 2008 in Asheville, North Carolina. Lydia Kavanaugh set up a little theremin orchestra. She had about 9 theremins on stage. And, we had to have everything spaced apart, about like we have here today. And of course, I was the one that was unlucky enough to have a theremin that got interfered with by another theremin that was a little too close. But you just improvise, it still had a cool effects sound to it. So those are the technical challenges that you have with the theremin. So you space them well apart, and then you'll be fine. And preferably use differing models of theremins. Like there's an ether wave standard by Moog Music over there. This is the B3 Pro, and so you can have those a little bit closer together and they won't bother each other because they're on different frequencies. Kind of like your garage door opener or remote control is on a different frequency than another device, so they don't interfere. But you bring that one over here, and you'll get a little bit of interference because it's almost on the same frequencies.
How thick is the field that you're passing through?
Well, the field can extend out quite a ways. But right now I've got it tuned so that it becomes silent about here. And I'm actually picking up a little RF interference from somewhere, but probably that theremin. But for today's demonstrations, it's not a big deal. But it can extend out quite far. In fact, I'll just kind of detune this theremin a little bit so that the theremin's field is a little bit smaller. And if I can do it just right, we'll get it to where we can get into the other fields of the other zones of the field. There we go. Yeah, we have what's called zones. We have a plus zone that's closer to the antenna, and we play in that zone. Everything works right reading, so to speak, in that zone. As you get close to the antenna, the notes go up. As you go away, the notes come down. Then you have an area where there's silence. Like right in here, there's silence. And as you keep going, you get into what we call the negative zone, where everything works in reverse, and it's more like playing a trombone. You can actually do an air trombone. Of course, you don't have as many octaves, but it's fun. There's several artists who do use that negative beat zone for effects and stuff. But I usually prefer to play in the plus zone. I'll just retune a bit. Yeah, that's close enough. And but the field can go out all the way across the room if you want it to.
How deep is it?
How deep? Like this?
Yeah, like thickness. I mean, you pass through one line.
For each note, that depends on how far out you have the field spread. It's dynamic, it's variable. And so, like from like one note to the next, on this setting, Doesn't take much space. In fact, the distance between notes is because the instrument is portamento, meaning you can just, there's no definite separation of notes like on a keyboard. It's all just it's just like singing almost. And it's so sensitive that you can actually breathe, and this will demonstrate why the instrument is the most difficult instrument in the world to play well. That's not it. Brilliant. But if you're playing, you can actually stand at the theremin and breathe. That's all it takes. That's all it takes. It's just breathing. And so you have to learn to play. And this is where yoga could almost come into play with the theremin. You have to learn shallow, slow breathing techniques when you're playing the theremin. And especially if you try to play a classical tune or something and you just run a marathon, jump up on stage, you're going to be sounding like it's not going to work. So you have to be relaxed. You have to get relaxed before you play. You have to be relaxed while you're playing. Otherwise, it's not going to sound relaxed. And the audience is going, what's wrong with them? And so that's one of the reasons why it's so hard to play. Another reason why is you're standing there at the theremin. All you have to do is move. And if you're not balanced, I mean, if you have, for the adults among us, you don't want to be drinking alcohol at the theremin. You don't drink and thereminize. Serious penalties for that. Of course, if you're playing at a bar or something, you just tell the audience, the more of those you drink, the better this thing sounds. It's brilliant. So it's a fun instrument to play, but it is challenging to play. It's the most difficult instrument in the world to play well, but you just have to have patience. It takes weeks to go from sounding like a cat fight in a sewer pipe to playing a scale, but with patience and diligence, you can actually learn how to play the theremin. And Lord knows I spent many hours each day for several years just teaching myself how to play. And it's just all about experimentation. What happens if I do this, or if I do that? You just play with the theremin, and over time you develop your own techniques. You watch the masters, you watch the DVDs, you watch the YouTube videos, and get the books, and and just experiment. And sooner or later you find yourself combining all those techniques, and maybe even coming up with your own techniques. That's the neat thing about it.
Are you turning that off and on? Because at times you're talking and you're waving your arms and it's not doing it.
Right. Well, this instrument is equipped with a mute switch.
Oh, okay.
Has a little button. Yeah. If I didn't have that muted.
Oh, okay. Every time you move.
Yeah, it would be. And those theremins do not have mute switches, so you have to mute them by draping the audio cable over the volume loop. The closer that you are, or a cable with electrical or wire in it gets to that loop, the quieter the instrument gets. So you can mute it that way, as you see over there and there. But with this one, you don't have to do that. You have a little switch, and so it's pretty cool. And there's even a little LED that tells you if it's muted or not, just by the color code. And that's how that's done.
Does it make a difference if you're right-handed or left-handed?
No, you can. It depends on the musician's preference.
Yeah.
There's left-handed theremins. Pamela Kirsten's one. And if you buy a theremin today, if the manufacturer doesn't make it left-handed, guess what?
You turn it around. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Left-handed theremin. Away you go.
Can you break a glass with that?
I've never tried that. I never got I'm pretty sure that if you turn up the volume enough on the amp and have a little crystal glass, or you might be able to break it. You might go deaf in the process. But I'm pretty sure someone can. I think I saw something on Discovery once. Someone sang into a microphone and had that amplified, and had a wine glass sitting next to the amplifier, and they broke the glass with it with just their voice. You know, and I've heard of that being done, and you know, so I'm like, that would make a good YouTube video. You know, I'm only sorry I don't have glass here, but I don't want to deafen a whole bunch of people. You know, you guys want to learn how to play this thing, or at least listen to it. You know, and so another question.
Can you still do cat fight in a sewer pipe?
Well, that's easy. I mean, that's as easy as a wave of a hand. You know. You know, but nowadays I play classically, and it comes out sounding something like what I'm about to play. And some of you have already heard this last night, but it's it's a good little piece. Just find a good one. Here we go. Una Furtiva Lagrima. It's an Italian aria.
is, or do you have to have a secret little test note?
There is a secret, a little test note. And that's part of why I have my speaker behind me. In addition to the speaker that's out there for y'all, I have the little speaker here, which is actually like a monitor speaker, like what a rock star would have in front of them on the foot of the stage. This allows me to hear my note without letting y'all hear the note, just quietly. I just like say, well, I want to play maybe here. I don't know if you can hear that. Can you? Maybe a little bit, especially in this room, everything carries. But if I've got accompaniment going, I can kind of sort of quietly listen for it. And violinists do this as well when they're about to play. You'll hear them you'll see them kind of test the note a little bit, and then they'll release it to the audience. And it's what they call pitch fishing. I prefer the term pitch location. Pitch fishing, well, maybe I'll get one. Pitch location means you find the location of that note, and then you play it. And so it's pretty cool technique. It's been used by a lot of the great thereminists throughout the decades. Clara Rockmore started that technique, and so. It's a neat way to get around it. Now, some theremin is like that theremin over there actually has a little jack in it, a little earphone jack in it, that allows you to hear the tone all the time through an earbud. And for me, that's a little distracting because I'm concentrating on listening to the accompaniment. I don't need a tone always going in my ear all the time. Some performers do like it, and it helps them. It comes in handy if you're doing a professional recording. And you don't want to mess up the entrance of a note, and you've got to know that note's going to be there when you play it, that it's accurate. So they have what's called pitch preview, and so it allows you to preview the tone all the time as you're playing, and so you have just a constant dialogue with the theremin. But like I said, that kind of distracts me a little bit, and a lot of the other professional thereminists prefer not to do it because, in my opinion, and I mentioned this on my DVD. I believe it can dull your senses of what I call intuitive pitch control, knowing where basically a note might be. Like a note from here to here might be an octave. And if you're using pitch preview a lot, you might be lulled into a false sense of security depending on that pitch preview. And if the time comes when that pitch preview is not there, or your accompaniment is too loud for you to hear pitch preview, then you're going to be in trouble and not really know how to get to that note. A little bit like flying a plane, actually. Of course, I wouldn't know what that's like. I'm legally blind. They won't let me fly those things. Won't even let me drive. But I can play with theremin. I have a lot of fun doing it. Any other questions?
How fast can you play?
Oh, well, that's a good question. There is a speed limit to how fast you can play.
Because one movement within
Fly the bumblebee, yeah.
Well, yeah, if you go too fast, you're liable to have an accidental. And jumps, then it becomes totally impractical. So really, ideally, and as you notice, it was not accurate. There were mistakes, lots of them. But ideally, you want music that's flowing, kind of either smooth, slow to a medium pace, something that's manageable to where you have enough time to go from here to here and know that you're going to land on the accurate note. You can get away with it if the piece is scale-like, where you have a lot of... But if you have something that's going to be way over here, way down here, and they want you to do that how fast?
Yeah.
I don't think so. You know, if you value your career, you're not going to really risk that. You know, you'll either, you know, stick to medium paced works, or, you know, wait a good long time before you mess about with a very fast paced song. So, you know, the pieces that you'll hear today, you know, they're all just kind of medium paced, very manageable, easy for me to play after a few years, but you know, and you'll find out when you try these theremins out. And I'm going to let everyone here have a go at the theremins, you know, a little bit. I'll play a couple more tunes for you, and then we'll check that out. And so, let's see what we can. Oh, did anyone have any other questions?
I've got one.
Okay, yeah, speak up, because I'm illegally blind, so I might not see your hand.
Okay. What genres of music is theremin usually used in? I notice you tend towards more classical.
Yeah, classical seems to work best with theremin, but it is increasingly becoming popular with jazz funk, blues, rock. And so it is expanding out into the different genres, you know, and you know, it takes a while for that to happen. It takes a little getting used to as well. But it's pretty cool, and you know, I've got a CD out that has a jazz piece that I wrote myself, and I used I couldn't afford a band at the time, so I used a software program called Band in a Box to produce my accompaniment. But it sounds pretty cool, and I call it Mint Julep Fantasy. And it's a jazz-like tune, thrown in there amongst all the other classical works. You know, had to do something to wake up the audience with. But I am with a real theremin band called the Adrian Hester Group, and he plays jazz funk, he plays the bass, upright and electric, and we've been together for a few months, and we're just now starting to get to where we're putting together a CD. And if you go to his website, adrianhester.com, and just click on music, he's got a tune up already, you know, for a demo, and he's putting it out on a CD called Intervention, which should be quite interesting. He's got, you know, a lot of different jazz tunes, and two of the pieces will have theremin in it, and so it's pretty cool. Anyone else? Did you have a question? No? Okay, it's just okay. I will go ahead and play a couple more tunes, and I'll have people come up and have at the theremins a little bit. I'll kind of do a little bit of a lesson. I'll probably bring out, you know, 2 or 3 at a time to a theremin. Let people have a go at experimenting with it. And this one is done by Handel. This piece is one of Handel's pieces, Lascia Ch'io Pianga. I haven't a clue what that translates to, but it's a nice sounding piece. Today's Sunday, so this would be an appropriate piece. Try a theremin. We got two theremins right here, and they're on, and they're just screaming for a volunteer to try it.
What do they call
Oh well, that one over there runs about 150 just for the instrument itself, another 100 or so for the amp. You know, if you buy the amp separate. That one over there by Moog runs about $400 without the amp. You have to buy a mic stand and amp in order to have it set up like this. But they usually have a package deal where you can just buy like the amp, a small amp, the microphone stand, and the theremin for I think it's about 500 or 600, something like that. This instrument, just the instrument by itself, the D3 Pro runs about $350. They also make Burns also makes a theremin that's about the same size cabinet, a little bit simpler design, same length, for about $200, and that's the B3 Deluxe. And of course you add the stand and amplifier too later to make it all work. That one, they sell just that little module, that little theremin for $150, and you add the amp and stand, And so, the instrument is about like buying just about any other musical instrument. You have your entry level theremins, as you know, an entry to intermediate. That one's also an intermediate level theremin. Then you have professional theremins, which run into the thousands. Like the Etherwave Pro, put out by Moog Music. Well, it's discontinued, unfortunately. It's a beautiful instrument, stands about this tall, has a nice curved cabinet. It just looks like a piece of art. And unfortunately, they only made like 1,200 of those, so that goes for several thousand on the web, if you can find it on eBay. And then it's the old classic theremins that were made back in the 30s by RCA Victor Corporation. The RCA theremins, those can run many thousands of dollars. There was only 500 of those. But now you have theremins today that are pretty, well, commonly available through online music dealers and through the manufacturer's sites themselves as well.
And are the insides basically still the same as the original?
Oh, close to it. You know, the only difference is for these instruments, there's transistors, no tubes, whereas on the old theremins that were made back in the 20s and 30s, and even up into the 40s, you know, there were radio tubes and, you know, vacuum tubes. You know, the little glass tubes about this tall, maybe about that big in diameter. You know, you've seen them in old televisions and stuff. You know, those are quite rare, but these are pretty common.
When you're practicing, can you wear earphones to, you know?
Oh, for the neighbor's benefit? Yeah, you can wear headphones if you want to hear your accompaniment better, or if you want to hear yourself, you know, just practicing in quiet. You can use earphones or headphones. You know, just don't turn up too loud, you know. You want to be able to continue practicing. And otherwise you'll have to play the drums.
Do you play any like Star Trek or Star Wars things?
I do a little bit. I can't do it today because that's copyrighted material, but
That's interesting.
yeah, they get on to you about that, you know, so I have to be careful of that. But yeah, I know the tunes and you know, so, but they didn't use theremin in Star Trek, oddly enough. They used he wanted to create the effect of a theremin. So he used a human voice and a flute. Had a flute come in as well, just playing in unison. So it created this wonderful little just that kind of, you know, theremin-like sound. You know,
Can you show us a few of the spacier sounds on that?
Yeah, you can run the theremin through an effects device, and I'll just call up an effect. I think it's still on the same effects I was using last night. So. It's a little delay. Just by adding an effects device. You know, this is just a common mixer that you can pick up at any music shop, you know, for maybe a couple $100. And you know, you just select whatever effect you want and then go with it. I also have a reverb pedal put out by Digitech. It also has a little bit of effect as well. And I'll just show you a little bit of what it can do. Sounds like a ghost. Pretty eerie. And you can just select whatever settings you want, set how much effect you want. And if you want to add a little more effect, you just bring in your other effects device. But when you're playing classical music, you don't want a whole lot of effect. If anything, you just want a small amount of reverb. Well, that wasn't classical music, but
So it's just crisper that one.
yeah, it's a little bit crisper. You get just enough liveness, kind of like you're in a hall or something, but you don't want so much that you lose the articulation. You want to be able to hear a little bit of articulation and just at the same time, hear a little bit of life in the note. And so that's why I use just a little bit of reverb when I'm doing classical music or any other kind of music, really. So it doesn't sound so dead like you're in a tomb or something, which theremins sound like anyway. And so, it's just a brilliant instrument. Did anyone have any other questions?
Have you had a chance to try one of those that was made in the 30s?
No, not in the 30s, but there's a picture of me trying one that it's a replica of an RCA style theremin. It has actual tubes and the big coil, the antenna coils inside it, and it's a big cabinet. Just go to my website and click on Ether Music 2008 at thomasgrillo.com. Just go to thomasgrillo.com and click on Ether Music. And you'll see a nice picture of me in the upper right corner playing one that looks like an RCA theremin, but it's a replica designed by a gentleman by the name of Mark Keppinger, and it's owned by a guy named Phil Neidlinger. I can never pronounce that name right. Play the theremin, can't pronounce names. But yeah, it's a very interesting experience because it sounds a little bit different from a transistor theremin. They have a little bit softer, smoother tone to them, more warmth. You hear a little more warmth in the note. So it's really neat. It's kind of like the difference between a transistor amp and a tube type amp when someone's playing a guitar through those. There's a nice, richer tone to them. So it's kind of like that. Pretty cool. Anyone else?
Who was buying them in the 30s? You said the RCA made like 500. Did it
Yeah.
sell in the Sears catalog or?
Just about, almost. Some music stores sold them, they distributed them to a few music stores, mostly along the East and West Coast. They weren't very widely available. Of course, back then they cost like maybe several $100s, and back, today's, that would be a lot of money in today's money. It's pretty rare. Not a whole lot of people were buying them. Just the professional musicians were buying them. In fact, RCA even made a certain class of theremins that were designed strictly for use in the home. They even put a label on the inside door of the RCA theremin for a certain model. It said for license for home use only. I'm like, how are they going to know? What, they got theremin police out there going to find out if you're playing one out in a concert or something? Then they had the professional model. Who's going to know the difference? But I think the home use version only had like 2 or 3 octaves. And the professional model maybe had 1 extra octave. And that might be their leg to stand on, I guess. They didn't want a professional say, "Oh, I bought this theremin and it only played 3 octaves or 2 octaves." Well, you should have bought the pro model. Get that extra octave.
If you take this off.
Yeah, it'll start playing. Yeah. Just go ahead and do that, and as you move your hand into the field.
Excuse me.
That's fine, right?
Are they dangerous?
No, not at all. If they were dangerous, I wouldn't. They're scary enough as it is. But no, they're not dangerous. Not that I know of. There still has yet to be some research done on theremins versus like pacemakers, and so far I've yet to hear of any reports of any problems. And you know, one of the biggest questions I get on the web is, do they cause cancer? And Leon Theremin and Clara Rockmore played theremins for decades. You know, they, you know, from the 1920s up until I guess Clara and Leon died in the mid 90s or mid to late 90s, and no sign of cancer that we know of. You know, so they happily built or played the theremins, you know, all through that time. And
A little bit about the film.
that's mentioned in the video Theremin, Electronic Odyssey. I highly recommend you get that video if you want to see a good history, you know, a good historic reference of the theremin and those who built and played them. You know, very fascinating. In fact, it's required viewing in my classes. Along with my DVD.
Which are for sale out in
Yes,
LA?
remaining. You know, and of course, I have my CD as well. You know, I've got a CD of classical music as well as a radio drama that I wrote a couple of years ago, and you know, it's just done just like I just felt like doing something that sounded like something from the 30s, and you know, just a radio drama. You know, so that's available as well. Any questions? And it looks like Bill's got you know, he's got the idea. He's getting the idea for his class. And Bill, if you want to follow through with me to find a note, you know, I'll just kind of like play a note and let you try to find it. Yeah, and then I'll just play a note here. He's trying to he's like and I'll try another note. Well, let's play one lower. There you go.
Yeah. All right.
And then I'll play a higher note again. Almost there.
He went head
Closer than you are. This way?
Yeah, towards the intent. There you go.
The antenna is a little adjustable, got it, right?
Yeah, this one's adjustable, but yeah, I got the stand about higher. I had that one set a little lower so kids could walk up to it and play a little easier. So try one more. This time we'll play low note, a little further away from the there you go. Let's see if we can find it.
Yeah.
That would be, well, to your right. More. A little more.
Fire.
A little more. There you go. That kind of gives you an idea of just how difficult it is to play the
Well,
there.
yeah, I mean, there's no set area exactly.
Yeah, you don't feel anything.
Yeah.
There's no tactile interface, nothing to touch. You don't feel anything. You don't feel the feel at all.
Yeah.
So it's all in your muscle memory. How your arm feels here versus here. You know, what's it going to do if I play this note, and what's it going to do if I go here? You never know. And one of the most challenging aspects of the theremin is things can change with the theremin, and this is another reason why they're so difficult to play. You might have your instrument nicely tuned, and if I'm holding a note and Bill were to walk over here while I'm holding that note and walk into this field,
Do that?
yeah, I'm going to try to hold this note as he walks right up to the theremin. I didn't move my hand. It's all him.
In that field?
Yep.
Wow.
nicely tuned, and if the weather changes severely enough, you might have to adjust it a little bit, you know, because the humidity and temperature can affect the field a little bit. You can widen it or shrink it a little bit, and you just have to use the pitch knob to adjust the field out or in a little bit.
So these knobs are here.
Yeah, there's a pitch knob. Yeah, there's like on that instrument there's 4 knobs. One knob controls the pitch. One knob controls the volume, sensitivity, and those are your tuners. Kind of like the tuners in an organ or something like that. Yeah, now you're no longer tuned. Yeah, the idea.
That's pretty.
Yeah, the idea. Sure, and the idea would be to have it to where you get silence about where your left hand is, you know, or maybe a little bit closer in, and so you have to tune the instrument just by adjusting the width of the field with that knob. You have to change it so that you can get the desired field size, just like that. And so that way you can play it too. Well, I see it's a little bit after 12:30. No, it's actually 1:30. And what time do you have to go?
Oh, I don't know what.
It's 1:35.
1:30? Yeah, so we're right on schedule then.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed the demonstration. If you all want to try it again.
Yeah.